Speaking of wild conspiracy theories, conservative talk radio host Michael Savage, who has one of the biggest radio audiences in the country, has even been suggesting that this is all some Obama plot to purposely infect the nation.
There is not a sane reason to take 3,000 or 4,000 troops and send them into a hot Ebola zone without expecting at least one of them to come back with Ebola, unless you want to infect the nation with Ebola.
Myths and misconceptions. It's what's being pushed around not only by the mainstream media, but by certain syndicated talk show hacks who seem to be willing to take everything for granted, to use it to their advantage, and to basically frighten a population. Ebola is in America right now, but Ebola can be controlled. However, we still need to look at the CDC and the Center for Disease Control, who seem to be finding themselves apologizing every single day for mistakes they have made. Why are we here? Why have they made so many mistakes? Let's dig in a little deeper. Let's welcome from Newsmax.com, the Newsmax Deputy Health Editor, Nick Tate joins us here on studio. Nick, every single time we talk, there is a CDC representative, there is Tom Frieden, there is somebody coming out and saying we made a mistake. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't this an agency that was created to be ready to face off against such disasters as this that should have been looking years ahead?
Well, that's why they call it the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But in fact, what we've seen in the Dallas case and the arrival of Ebola here, those protocols that were put in place were not effectively overseen. And now CDC is saying they're going to make some changes. And, you know, on some level, this is how science develops. When something presents in a way that you don't expect, you do make some changes. On the other hand, it does seem often like we're a day late or longer and we're really a dollar short. And I still don't think we have a handle on it.
Well, but that's, I think, what has most people mystified and angry. Because as we've talked to a lot of doctors, they've said, looking back at the CDC, the thing that's missing to them is imagination. Because you're supposed to be thinking of these things.
That's right.
So why, is it as simple to say that they haven't been thinking about them, they ignored it, they basically cashed the paychecks? What's the answer?
Well, I think that the CDC placed a great deal of trust in some things that we now look back and say we shouldn't have. The idea that the protocols themselves would be enough. The idea that local hospitals, particularly smaller hospitals that have never seen a case of Ebola, would be able to handle it, control it, contain it, and treat the people who have it. Finally, the idea that just these garments themselves, the protective equipment, would be enough to protect workers. Now, as we've seen with at least 2 nurses, these are cases where they were wearing the protective equipment. They seem to be following the protocol, although there's some question about it in the case of one nurse.
Well, there's even a question as to exactly what the protocol was.
That's
because
right.
The Nurses Association says we were never given any protocols.
That's right. And it raises the question, are we putting too much trust in what has been written down and what has happened in the past? Ebola is a live virus. There's the potential for it to mutate and change, particularly as it moves from West Africa to this country. And I think exactly that's right. The failure of imagination, as we've seen in the past, has caused us problems, and this may be the case with Ebola too.
We look now at what they're trying to do in order to cover their tracks in many ways. One of the things we're hearing now is they're going to take, the CDC is suggesting that all health workers who are exposed to Ebola now be put on a no-fly list. I think what has a lot of people shaking their head at that is, why is there not a no-fly list from Africa and other countries of Africa coming here? You'll take care of it when it's here, but you won't stop it from walking into the country.
Well, there are 2 things that a lot of medical experts are saying should be done. One is restricting the traffic from West Africa to the U.S.
Restricting or stopping completely?
Stopping completely, banning, because that will keep Ebola from getting here. That won't restrict our ability to send aid workers there. The question is coming back. Chartered flights could bring those folks back more safely, more effectively, keep it under control. That's number 1. 2, people with Ebola who get Ebola in this country should be treated, medical experts tell us, at facilities that are able to handle it. Now, we don't know why this second nurse from Dallas has been transferred to Atlanta, but we do know that Emory University and Hospital in Atlanta is one of 4 centers in the country where they have these biocontainment facilities. They've been able to treat Ebola patients in the past, and they have the wherewithal, the training, the expertise, and the equipment to make sure that the healthcare workers there are safe. You know, I think part of the complication here, Ed, is there's a great deal of myths and misconceptions out there, and I think that that's fed the concerns here. The truth is that we only have a small number of Ebola cases so far in this country, and it is not airborne the way that the flu is. So those are a couple things we need to keep in mind. I think that's made because it's kind of it's a complicated issue. It's a nuanced issue, but we need to be very vigilant and make sure it does not get to that big outbreak stage so that it's killing people the way that the flu now kills tens of thousands.
All right, now I only got a couple seconds, but we need to make sure that we tell people there is no evidence at this time that Ebola is airborne, correct?
That's,
none.
That's correct. So really the best thing you can do this year, if you haven't gotten a flu shot, You need to get a flu shot because I'm telling you, this is not the year you want to be in an ER with a fever because you have the flu.
Myths and misconceptions. It certainly is all a big part of it, and some people are using Ebola to do nothing more than feather their nest, make a couple of bucks, and make sure that the media covers them on a regular basis.
That's true.
That's part of the problem. Later on this hour, proof positive that the state of Florida is indeed unlike any other, and that's not necessarily a good thing when it comes down to elected officials. It's coming up right here on Midpoint.